Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Read TFOS, where I take old stories I've narrated and update into modern audio standards. This story is called Never Trust a Human, written by Tress Bros. Gorlak still remembered the first time he had ever seen a human. He was still just a fledgling then, and whenever he'd think back on his first encounter, he'd tell himself that there was no way that he could have known better. The humans were the newest species of the block, only known to the Empire for 45 sols. Finding a new sapient species was always been one of the most exciting events in the galaxy, as there had previously only been 8 discovered so far. So when a radio wave floating in deep space from species number 9 was stumbled onto, an embassy was quickly formed to meet the new neighbors at their home planet. On one fateful summer day, the alien ship Perazino Phylos landed on Earth. The humans were indeed a strange people, but every species in the Empire had their quirks. There was no doubt that the humans would integrate into galactic culture, sure enough. Once proper contact was made, both sides began to trade culture and technology with one another. The humans were adept learners, and they quickly became competent space travelers. And so, 45 sols after their discovery, Gorlak stumbled into a human at a McDonald's. Although fast food of McDonald's was a human invention, Gorlak never expected to actually find a human in this one. This location was buried deep within the Empire, close to Gorlak's homeworld. Looking back, everyone was amazed at how quickly Earth's mega-corruptions were able to seamlessly enter the Empire's citizens' daily lives. And so, while wondering about what to order, Gorlak felt a strange tapping on his back feathers. It wasn't the familiar ruffling that he was used to, but a strange poking sensation. It was like he was being probed right to his skin. He turned his head 180 degrees to get a look at what poked him, and he saw it. It was a human, pale, skinny, with a tuft of brown fur on the top of his head. It stood roughly the same height as Gorlak's, but there was something strange about seeing a sapient mammal right in front of him. Gorlak instinctively ruffled his feathers to make himself appear bigger, and unconsciously let out a small screech. The human must have noticed he had scared Gorlak, and with a fiddle of his translator, Gorlak heard the first words a human ever spoke to him. "Ah, Jesus, my bad man, are you okay?" Gorlak wasn't quite sure how to respond. But he was an educated and modern Threnkek, nothing like some of his speciest friends. So he resolved himself to be the best Threnkek possible, and really show this human just how diplomatic and forward-thinking they could be. "Of course. I was just daydreaming a bit when you poked me with your fleshy digit." The human scratched his lower mandible for a moment and responded, Guess you bird people don't have a word for a finger. Anyways, I was hoping that you could help me with something. After all I've heard, your Threnkeks are some of the smartest and wisest creatures in the whole galaxy." Gorlak was pleased with this response from the human, and quickly put away memories of his friends calling humans the most conniving masses of carbon to ever live. These humans were a reasonable folk. "Well, some species are simply better at some things than others. What can I help you with?" The human seemed to think his response was funny, as his lips curled into a grin when he heard Gorlak's response. The human quickly responded back, "How true that is. I'm glad I found a Threnkek to solve this problem for me. Can we sit down while I explain my predicament to you?" The human didn't wait for Gorlak to respond, and he quickly turned around and took a seat at an empty booth. "You must really need my help," Gorlak thought, as he followed the human. Once seated, the human began his plea. "Thank you so much for listening to me, wise one. I'm in dire need of help, as I found myself stranded far out in the galaxy, far away from my kingdom. You see, I'm royalty, a prince in fact, from the greatest kingdom of all, Earth, Nigeria. I took a trip to your beautiful world to learn about your superior way of life when I was robbed by a Threnkek while at the market. Now I find myself with no way to get back home, for though I have billions of eins in my bank accounts on Earth, I have no way to access them without my identification, which was stolen from me. A ship costs tens of thousands of ein, but I'm not able to purchase one. I found myself stranded far from home. I've told you this because your species is renowned for its wisdom, and I hope that maybe you could find some way to solve this problem, which my human mind couldn't have come up with on its own." Gorlak couldn't believe what he just heard. Earth royalty, right in front of him. He was sure that the human was telling the truth. He faintly remembered something his friends told him about a Nigerian prince who was in the area. Truth be told, he never really listened closely when his speciest friends complained about humans, and he must have been royalty, as he was smart enough to know to turn to a Threnkek. The human was in a tough situation, he must admit, lost far in space without a way home. Yes, this human was lucky to run into a wise Threnkek and not some Salku. A ship would run about 25,000 ein, practically his entire bank account. Now, how could he get the human ship for 25,000 ein? Suddenly, it dawned upon him. He could take the money out of his account and give it to the human. Once home, the human could pay him back with his billions, maybe even a little extra, and they'd both be better off. Gorlax couldn't help but be smug as he explained his ingenious plan to the poor human. Humans really were so lucky to have a Threnkek in the galaxy. The human seemed to be amazed at the plan, and Gorlax could just watch as his mammalian brain slowly grasped the sheer intellect of his idea. Once fully grasped, the human was in full support of the plan, and with a quick transfer of iron, the human promised to pay back double what was given to him once he returned home. Gorlax watched the human leave the McDonald's and felt good for steering the species in the right direction. Yes, these humans had a lot to learn about the galaxy, but he was sure they'd catch up eventually. End of story. Story number 2. Revelation at Sol, written by Tweaky Grug. Access log number 15675908901. Password unknown. Access granted. FTL was surprisingly easy technology for us to develop and nearly master. It was as if the building blocks of our own hyperdrives were in orbit of our home world. We thought that, perhaps, we had a great benefactor out there. For surely this could only have happened by some external entity. There was no such benefactor. In fact, we were the first to reach out of our solar system and grasp at the void between stars. Nearly 50 Juven years had passed before we had found another sentient race on an exoplanet. Almost as a light-hearted mockery of our lovely 10-limbed forms, these first sapient Xenos we encountered were worm-like in appearance. Some of us Juvens were mildly repulsed, but we were all so much more fascinated with what we could learn from them. Throughout the majority of our own history, it had been peaceful. A small war for vital resources here, an accidental meltdown of fission reactors there. These worms, on the other hand, were seemingly at constant war with one another, which we found equal parts intriguing and terrifying. Perhaps it wasn't an eternal war, but merely something that they had evolved to do. After yet another 3 Juven decades of deciphering their language and studying their history, did we finally understand this eternal war. The only food source that the Gondonites could eat anymore was themselves, other than the fact they ate all other food resources on the planet and somehow hadn't gone extinct as a result. Their history was quite similar. The Elder Council decided that knowing what we know, the Gondonites would make excellent friends. We proceeded to uplift them, and they were infinitely grateful that their first encounter was so peaceful and loving. It only took them 3 of their years to retrofit the entirety of their infrastructure with our technology, and we lauded them for it. So then we found something that restructured our understanding of the galaxy. We found the humans. We were the first to reach out into the vast expanse beyond our home system, but we were certainly not the first. What led us to the humans was a peculiarly dim yellow dwarf that, given its mass, should have been much brighter. We studied it from a distance for years, and it only got dimmer. The joint scientific community between us Juvens and the Gondonites was set alight with an anomalous star. Theory crafting ran rampant like a ravenous wildfire. Some suggested that this star was being mined by civilians for its raw resources. Others retorted with the fact that we were the first. Many simply said it was just dying weird. Everyone else pushed vehemently to go to the star and see what exactly was causing it. The JRC put it to a vote, and it was a landslide in favor of getting inside that star system. So we sent the Serene Surveyor out to the system in question. Upon arrival, the crew was met with an entire solar system bustling with life. Every rock, gas giant, and ice giant in the system had sprawling cities and vibrant ecosystems. As the serene surveyor proceeded through the system at relativistic snail pace, the crew noticed a massive ring around the second, third, and fourth planetary bodies of the system. Each ring was calculated to be somewhere in the outer atmosphere of each planet, with tethers extending back down to the ground. Another look towards the star heralded another revelation. It was being mined, and it had a swarm of orbital habitats in a cloud around it. The crew of our exploration vessel were dumbfounded. How could any of this be done? How long did it take, and why haven't they expanded out of their solar system in all the time it took to do all of this? Do they even have FTL? A message from the third planet chimed in on the ship's comms in our own language, terrifying the crew to no end. The message simply stated, FTL has evaded us for a millennia, and here you are proving its existence and feasibility. We can teach you so much, and you can teach us as well. So please do land on the third planet from the star, so that we can begin our prosperous relations with you and your people. Welcome to the Sol System. End of story. I would like to thank our T5 members and patrons, Casper Arnholtz, John Creighton, Vidmori, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.